The casket was being lowered into the ground when Sylvia leaned in close to my ear. Her bony fingers squeezed my shoulder with fake sympathy as she whispered, "You have 1 week to get out of my son's house." I sat frozen on the metal folding chair, my black dress soaked from the morning rain. The priest's final words became a distant mumble as her threat echoed in my head. Daniel had been dead for 3 days, and his mother was already erasing me. My hands trembled as I clutched the tissue box in my lap. Around us, mourners dabbed their eyes and shared memories of my husband. But all I could think about was Sylvia's cold voice cutting through my grief like a knife. She pulled back with a practiced smile, her hand still on my shoulder for the cameras. To everyone else, she looked like a caring mother-in-law comforting the widow. But I felt the sharp bite of her nails through the fabric. The injustice hit me like a punch to the stomach. I was grieving the love of my life, trying to figure out how to breathe without him. And she was already planning my eviction. As dirt began covering Daniel's casket, I realized this was just the beginning. Sylvia had been waiting for this moment. Now that Daniel was gone, she could finally get rid of me. Back at the house, Sylvia moved through the crowd of mourners like a queen holding court. She accepted condolences with grace, dabbing her eyes at just the right moments. But I noticed things others didn't. Daniel's military photos were gone from the mantel. His display case with his service medals had vanished from the hallway. Even his favorite coffee mug was missing from the kitchen counter. I wandered through rooms that suddenly felt foreign. Neighbors brought casseroles and shared stories, but everything felt wrong, like someone was slowly erasing Daniel from his own home. "Where's the picture of Daniel in his uniform?" asked his old army buddy Mike. Sylvia's laugh was light and airy. "Oh, I'm just organizing things, you know how it is." She waved her hand dismissively. "Sometimes it's too painful to look at reminders right away." But I saw the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't about grief. This was about control. When the last mourner left, Sylvia began clearing dishes with mechanical efficiency. I stood in the doorway watching her move through my kitchen like she owned it. "Such a lovely service," she said without looking at me. "Daniel would have been so proud." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The house felt different now. Colder, like she had already started claiming it as her own. I walked into the master bedroom and stopped dead. My clothes were folded neatly in cardboard boxes labeled Rachel's stuff. In Sylvia's careful handwriting. Half the closet was empty, my hangers dangling like broken bones. My jewelry box was gone from the dresser. The photo of Daniel and me from our honeymoon had been moved to a box. Even my reading glasses had been packed away. "Just organizing," Sylvia said from behind me, her voice sugar-sweet. "I thought you might want to start fresh somewhere new. This must be so hard for you." I turned to face her, my heart pounding. "This is my home, Sylvia." She tilted her head with fake sympathy. "Oh, honey, I know this is confusing. Grief does that to people. But Daniel and I talked about this. It's not personal." My hands clenched into fists. "What do you mean? You talked about this?" "Well, you're so young. You'll want to move on, start over. This big house would just be a burden for you." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the bedspread. "The movers can come whenever you're ready." I stared at the boxes containing my life. Everything I owned, everything that made this place home, reduced to cardboard containers with my name written in black marker. "Where's my jewelry box?" "Safekeeping," she smiled. "You wouldn't want anything to get lost during the move." The next morning, I went to Daniel's home office to find the property deed. We had bought this house together 3 years ago, both our names on everything. But when I opened the document drawer, it was empty. My heart raced as I searched through every file, every folder. Bank statements, insurance papers, tax documents. Everything was there except the one thing that proved this house was half mine. "Looking for something?" Sylvia appeared in the doorway holding a cup of tea. "The house deed. It was in this drawer." She frowned with concern. "Oh dear, are you sure? Daniel kept all his important papers at the bank, safety deposit box, you know." But I remembered clearly. We had put the deed in this drawer after closing, along with all our other important documents. I had organized this filing system myself. "Daniel and I discussed the house situation many times," she continued. "He was always worried about leaving you with such a big financial burden. Property taxes, maintenance, mortgage payments. It's a lot for a young woman to handle alone. Her words sounded reasonable, but something felt off. Daniel had never mentioned being worried about me handling the house. In fact, he had joked about us growing old here together. I closed the empty drawer, my mind racing. Either I was losing my memory from grief, or Sylvia was playing games. "I'll check the bank tomorrow," I said quietly. "Good idea, dear." She sipped her tea. "I'm sure Daniel would want you to be practical about these things." I waited until Sylvia left for her book club before heading to the attic. If the deed wasn't in the office, maybe Daniel had moved it somewhere else for safekeeping. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight as I pulled down boxes labeled in Daniel's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, college photos, army stuff. Then I found it, home purchase. Inside was everything from when we bought the house. The original deed, clearly showing both our names, purchase agreements, inspection reports, even the champagne cork from the night we got the keys. I scanned the deed with my phone, my hands shaking with relief and anger. Sylvia was lying. This house was legally half mine, and I had proof. As I took photos of every document, I heard a car door slam. Sylvia was back early. I quickly packed everything back in the box and pushed it to the far corner of the attic. By the time I climbed down the ladder, I could hear her moving around downstairs. "Rachel, where are you?" she called. "Just looking for something," I replied, dusting off my jeans. She appeared at the bottom of the ladder, studying my face. "Find what you were looking for." "Not yet," I lied, "but I will." Something flickered in her eyes. We stared at each other for a long moment, and I realized she knew exactly what I had been searching for. Over the next few days, Sylvia started small games that made me question my sanity. Drawers I remembered leaving unlocked were suddenly secured with keys that had vanished. My prescription bottles moved from the bathroom to random kitchen cabinets. The chair I always sat in at the dining table was replaced with an uncomfortable wooden one. When I asked about it, Sylvia acted confused. "That old chair, it was falling apart, dear. I threw it out for safety reasons." But the chair had been perfectly fine. Just like my reading glasses that kept disappearing, only to show up in strange places like the garage or basement. I started taking photos of things, documenting where I left them. When items moved, I had proof. But Sylvia's games were subtle enough that I sounded paranoid when I tried to explain them. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. "She doesn't know anything," Sylvia laughed. "Poor thing is so confused by grief, she can barely function. It's handled." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my pulse racing. "The lawyer said it would be simple once I have the right documentation," she continued. "She'll be out by the weekend." My blood ran cold. Sylvia wasn't just playing mind games. She was actively working to steal my home. I crept back upstairs, my mind spinning. Whatever she was planning, I needed to stay one step ahead. Daniel's home office held more secrets than I realized. While searching through his files again, I found mortgage refinance papers from just 3 months before his death. My name was clearly listed as co-borrower. But more importantly, Sylvia's name wasn't anywhere on these documents. I photographed every page, my excitement growing. If Daniel had refinanced the house recently, it proved we were both legal owners right up until his death. Sylvia couldn't claim the house was only in his name. Hidden behind the mortgage papers, I found something even better. Our homeowner's insurance policy, updated just 2 months ago. Both our names were listed as insured parties. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. Sylvia was trying to steal a house that legally belonged to me, and now I had evidence that she was lying about everything. I made copies of all the documents and hid them in different places around the house. If Sylvia found one set, I would still have backups. As I organized the papers, I felt Daniel's presence in the room. We had sat in these same chairs planning our future, talking about the renovations we wanted to make. He had always said this house was our forever home. Now I understood why the deed had disappeared from this drawer. Sylvia had taken it to support whatever lies she was telling her lawyer. But she had missed these mortgage papers. And that mistake was going to cost her everything. 3 days later, Sylvia dropped a bombshell that left me speechless. "I have something wonderful to share," she announced over breakfast, her hand resting on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." I nearly choked on my coffee. What? I know it's surprising, but Daniel and I had been planning this through donor fertilization. We wanted to give you a little brother or sister for Daniel. Her eyes filled with crocodile tears. Now this baby is all I have left of my son. My mind raced. Daniel had been dead for 10 weeks. The timeline didn't make any sense. When is the baby due? I asked carefully. 6 months from now. Daniel was so excited. He said the baby should grow up in the family home. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. That's why this house means so much to me. It's not just about property, it's about preserving Daniel's legacy. She pulled out an ultrasound photo and slid it across the table. Look, you can already see the little hands. I stared at the grainy black and white image. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. This is a lot to process, I said slowly. Of course it is. That's why I think it would be easier for everyone if you found your own place. Somewhere you can heal and move forward. She squeezed my hand. The baby will need stability, not the stress of shared living arrangements. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed her caring act. That evening, while Sylvia was in the shower, I searched through her purse and tote bag. Hidden in a side pocket, I found a folder labeled Backup Plan. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside were photocopies of a will I had never seen before, with Daniel's forged signature, leaving everything to his mother. Screenshots of bank accounts, even printed emails that looked like they came from Daniel's account. But the smoking gun was what I found next. Multiple copies of the ultrasound photo, each with different dates printed at the bottom. One was dated last week. Another was dated 3 months ago. I photographed everything with my phone, making sure to capture the metadata information. The fake will was created on a computer registered to Madison K. laptop. Sylvia's maiden name was Madison. She had been planning this for months, maybe even before Daniel died. The pregnancy story, the forged documents, the psychological games, it was all part of an elaborate scheme to steal everything. I put everything back exactly as I found it and slipped out of her room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anger. Daniel had trusted his mother. He had loved her despite her controlling nature. And she was using his death to commit fraud. As I heard the shower turn off, I made a decision. It was time to stop playing defense and start fighting back. The next morning, I called Mr. Barrett Holt, the lawyer Daniel had used for our house purchase. His secretary squeezed me in for an emergency appointment that afternoon. Mr. Holt was a gentleman in his 60s who had known Daniel since childhood. When I spread out my evidence across his conference table, his expression grew darker with each document. "This is more than a property dispute, Mrs. Richardson," he said after reviewing everything. "We're looking at will fraud, document forgery, and possibly elder abuse. These are serious criminal charges." My chest tightened, but not from fear, from purpose. Finally, someone believed me. "The ultrasound photos with different dates are particularly damning," he continued, "and this forged will is amateur work. Any probate judge will see right through it." He leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "The question is, how far are you willing to take this? Once we file these motions, there's no going back. This will get ugly." I thought about Daniel, about all the dreams we had shared in that house, about Sylvia's cruel whisper at his funeral, about the boxes with my name written in her handwriting. "She chose to make this ugly when she decided to steal from me at my husband's funeral," I said firmly. "I want to file everything. I want her stopped." Mr. Holt nodded with approval. "Then let's get to work. You've been reactive long enough. Now we go on offense." The next morning, I found an official-looking notice slipped under my bedroom door. The letterhead read, Willow Bend County Sheriff's Department, and the message was clear. I had 48 hours to vacate the premises or face charges for elder abuse and unlawful occupation of property. But as I read the fine print, my heart rate slowed instead of spiked. The document was full of legal errors that even I could spot. Wrong case numbers, misspelled court names, and a signature that looked suspiciously like Sylvia's handwriting. I almost laughed. She was so desperate that she was now creating fake legal documents. I photographed the notice and immediately sent it to Mr. Holt with a text. "She's getting sloppy." His response came back within minutes. "Perfect. This is harassment and fraud. Adding it to our case file." When Sylvia appeared in the kitchen an hour later, I was calmly drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. "Did you get the notice?" she asked, trying to sound concerned. "I did. Very creative." I didn't look up from the sports section. "Creative? Rachel, this is serious. The sheriff's department doesn't joke around." I finally met her eyes. Neither do real lawyers. She stared at me for a long moment, confusion flickering across her face. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. "I'm just trying to help you avoid trouble," she said weakly. "I know exactly what you're trying to do," I replied, turning back to my newspaper. Mr. Holt moved fast. Within 2 days, he filed a motion to freeze the property deed, preventing any transfer of ownership. He also submitted a formal complaint about probate fraud and requested a digital forensics investigation of all documents bearing Daniel's signature. The court clerk called me that afternoon. "Mrs. Richardson, Judge Martinez wants to see both parties in chambers tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please bring all original documentation." I could barely contain my excitement. Finally, we would have a chance to present the truth in front of someone with the power to stop Sylvia's schemes. That evening, I watched Sylvia pace around the living room, making frantic phone calls. "What do you mean they froze the deed?" she hissed into her phone. "That's not possible. I have the will." There was a long pause, then, "What investigation? She doesn't have any proof." Another pause. "No, I'm not worried about computer files. Everything was done properly." I smiled to myself. She had no idea how much evidence I had collected. Tomorrow would be full of surprises. When she finally hung up, she noticed me standing in the doorway. "Good news," I said cheerfully. "We have a court date tomorrow. Time to sort all this out once and for all." Her face went white. "Court? Don't worry," I added. "I'm sure your lawyer prepared you for this possibility." The fear in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, Sylvia tried one last manipulation tactic. She invited several neighbors over for coffee, staging what she called a grief support gathering. But I could see her real purpose. She wanted witnesses to hear her version of events. "Poor Rachel is so confused by grief," she told Mrs. Henderson from next door. "She doesn't understand that Daniel left the house to me for the baby's sake." I sat quietly in the corner, sipping my coffee and listening to her performance. "Of course, I don't want to force her out," Sylvia continued, "but she's become difficult, almost hostile. I'm worried about her mental state." Mrs. Henderson glanced at me with sympathy. "Grief affects people differently. Maybe she just needs more time." "Time is a luxury we don't have," Sylvia sighed dramatically. "The lawyers say I need to establish residency for the baby's birth certificate. Legal requirements, you understand." I finally spoke up. "Actually, the court will decide residency issues this afternoon." The room went quiet. Sylvia's coffee cup rattled against her saucer. "Court?" asked Mr. Patterson from across the street. "Just a formality," I said with a smile. "To clarify ownership documents. Amazing how much paperwork can get misplaced during times of stress." I saw Sylvia's face fall as she realized her neighborhood audience was now going to witness her lies unravel in real time. "More coffee, anyone?" I asked pleasantly. Before we left for court, Sylvia made one final attempt to sell her pregnancy story. She pulled out the ultrasound photo again, touching her stomach like a shield. "I know this is hard for you to accept, Rachel, but this baby is Daniel's biological child. I have all the documentation from the fertility clinic." I studied the grainy image she had shown me before. Something had been bothering me about it, and suddenly I realized what it was. "That's interesting," I said, "because I found the exact same photo online, from a stock photography website about pregnancy announcements." Her hand froze on her stomach. "The metadata on your printed version shows it was downloaded last Tuesday. Would you like me to show you the original listing?" I pulled out my phone. "It's still for sale. Only $12.99 for high-resolution prints." Sylvia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. For the first time since Daniel's funeral, she was speechless. "The fertility clinic documentation should be interesting too," I continued. "Since I called them yesterday, they have no record of Daniel ever being a patient." Her face went from pale to gray. You can't have called them. Patient privacy laws don't apply to widows asking about their deceased husband's medical history." I grabbed my purse, especially when armed with death certificates and marriage licenses. She stood there in stunned silence as I headed for the door. "See you in court, Sylvia." At the courthouse, Mr. Holt was waiting with a thick folder of evidence, but he had one more surprise for me. "I found something interesting in Daniel's email archives," he said. "A draft will from February, just 2 months before he died." He handed me a printed email. It was addressed to his lawyer but never sent. The subject line read, "Draft will, updated version." As I read Daniel's words, tears filled my eyes. "Barrett, please prepare a new will with the following changes. I want to ensure Rachel inherits the house and all assets if something happens to me. I've been having chest pains lately and want everything properly documented. My mother has been making comments about family property that concern me. Rachel is my family now, and I want to protect her." The email was never sent because Daniel died of a sudden heart attack 3 days after writing it. The metadata shows this was created on Daniel's personal laptop, Mr. Holt explained. Same laptop that shows the forged will was created weeks later, after he was already dead. I stared at the printout, feeling Daniel's presence in every word. Even from beyond the grave, he was still trying to protect me. "There's more," Mr. Holt continued. "The digital forensics team found the original will template downloaded from a legal website. It was accessed from Sylvia's home computer using her daughter Madison's user account." Game over. The hearing lasted less than an hour. Judge Martinez reviewed our evidence with growing disbelief. "Mrs. Sullivan," she addressed Sylvia, "are you claiming this ultrasound image represents your current pregnancy?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Even though our investigation shows it was purchased from a stock photography website last week?" Sylvia's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. There must be some mistake. What about this will dated after your son's death?" The judge held up the forged document. "Can you explain how a dead man signed legal papers?" Silence. "And the pregnancy itself? Our medical expert would like to examine you to confirm your claim." "That won't be necessary," Sylvia's lawyer said quickly. "My client wishes to withdraw her petition." But Judge Martinez wasn't finished. "This court finds evidence of probate fraud, document forgery, and harassment. Mrs. Richardson, I'm granting you full ownership of the marital property. Mrs. Sullivan, you have 48 hours to vacate the premises." She slammed her gavel with authority. As we left the courtroom, Sylvia grabbed my arm. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "And if you come near my house again, I'm calling the police." Mr. Holt smiled as we walked to our cars. Justice served. Back at the house, my house, I found Sylvia frantically making phone calls and throwing things into boxes. "This is all a misunderstanding," she told whoever's on the other end. "She manipulated the court. I'm the victim here." I stood in the doorway watching her pack. After weeks of psychological warfare, it felt surreal to see her defeated. "The movers will be here Friday," I said quietly. She spun around, her eyes wild. "You can't just throw me out. I'm an old woman." "You're a criminal who tried to steal my home," I corrected. "Friday is generous. The court gave you 48 hours. She threw a photo frame into a box with unnecessary force. "You have no idea what you've done. That baby." "There is no baby, Sylvia. There never was." For a moment, her mask slipped completely. The grieving grandmother disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Daniel never loved you the way he loved me," she spat. "You were just a convenience. I was his real family." Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. If that were true, he wouldn't have left everything to me. She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize the futility. The legal battle was over. She had lost. "I'll be gone by Friday," she said through gritted teeth. "Good." I turned to leave, then paused. "And Sylvia? Don't forget to return my jewelry box." That evening, I found something unexpected on the kitchen counter. A small flash drive with a sticky note that read, "For Rachel." Curious, I plugged it into Daniel's laptop. The drive contained a single video file dated 3 weeks ago. My heart stopped as Sylvia's face appeared on screen. She was sitting in this same kitchen, talking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, it means my plan worked," she said with a smug smile. "Poor little Rachel probably thinks she's so smart, but she has no idea what's coming." She leaned closer to the camera. "Daniel always said she was too trusting, too naive. Well, now she's about to learn what happens when you try to replace family with some random girl." The video continued for several minutes. with Sylvia detailing her entire scheme. The forged will, the fake pregnancy, even the psychological games she had been playing. "I'm not going to let some nobody inherit what my family built," she concluded. "This house belongs to the Sullivan family, not some outsider who got lucky with a wedding ring." When the video ended, I sat in stunned silence. Why would she record this? Why leave it for me to find? Then I realized this wasn't a confession. It was a taunt, one final attempt to hurt me by showing how little she thought of my marriage to Daniel. But she had made a crucial mistake. This video was now evidence of premeditated fraud. The next morning, I called Mr. Holt about the video. His reaction was immediate. "Bring it to my office immediately. This is a full admission of criminal intent." Within hours, he had filed additional charges against Sylvia. The video evidence was so damning that the district attorney decided to pursue criminal prosecution. But I realized something else as I watched the video again. Sylvia had been planning this for years, not months. She mentioned details about our marriage that she could only know if she had been watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Daniel's sudden heart attack had been her opportunity. She probably thought I would be too grieved and confused to fight back effectively. She was wrong. That afternoon, a detective came to take my statement. As I recounted everything that had happened since the funeral, I felt a strange sense of closure. "Mrs. Richardson," the detective said as he closed his notebook, "what your mother-in-law did was calculated and cruel. But your documentations saved this case. Without your evidence, it would have been your word against hers." I thought about all those photos I had taken, all the documents I had found and copied. Even in my darkest moments of grief, something had told me to pay attention and gather proof. Maybe it was Daniel watching over me, or maybe it was just survival instinct. Either way, justice was finally being served. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I watched from the living room window as the moving truck pulled into the driveway. Sylvia directed the movers with sharp, angry gestures, treating them like servants who had personally wronged her. She had avoided me for the past 2 days, communicating only through terse notes left on counters. Taking the china cabinet. Need boxes from the basement. Movers arrive at 9. As I watched her belongings disappear into the truck, I felt an unexpected wave of sadness. Not for her, but for Daniel. He had loved his mother despite her flaws. This would have broken his heart. Around noon, Sylvia appeared at the front door with a single suitcase. "I'm leaving now," she said stiffly. I nodded. "Drive safely." She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something else. For a moment, I saw a flash of the grief she had been hiding beneath all the anger and manipulation. "He really did love you," she said quietly. "I know he did. I thought I could fix things. Make them like they used to be." Her voice cracked slightly. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered her whisper at Daniel's funeral, and the sympathy evaporated. "Goodbye, Sylvia." She picked up her suitcase and walked to her car without looking back. As the moving truck disappeared down the street, I stood in the empty foyer of my house. Our house. Daniel's and mine. The silence felt different now. Not lonely or threatening, but peaceful. For the first time since the funeral, I could breathe without wondering what fresh manipulation awaited me. I walked through each room, reclaiming the space that had been contaminated by Sylvia's presence. In the master bedroom, I unpacked my clothes from those awful cardboard boxes and hung them back in the closet where they belonged. My jewelry box had been returned, sitting on the dresser like it had never left. Everything was there except for one item. My wedding ring, which I had never taken off. Even when Sylvia tried to convince me I wasn't really family. In Daniel's office, I found the deed in the filing cabinet where it had always been stored. Sylvia must have returned it before the court hearing, probably on her lawyer's advice. I ran my fingers over both our names on the legal document. Daniel Richardson and Rachel Richardson, joint owners, partners in everything. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood floors we had picked out together. This house was full of memories I had been afraid Sylvia would steal along with everything else. But memories can't be forged or fabricated. They live in the heart, not on paper. That evening, I lit a candle and sat in Daniel's favorite chair with a photo album from our wedding. As I turned the pages, I could almost hear his laugh, feel his hand in mine. "I did it," I whispered to his picture. "I fought for us." The house creaked gently around me, settling into its foundation, like it was sighing with relief. No more tension, no more walking on eggshells, no more wondering if I belonged here. I thought about Sylvia's video message, how she had called me an outsider who got lucky with a wedding ring. But she was wrong about that too. Daniel and I hadn't gotten lucky. We had chosen each other every single day. Love isn't about blood or birth certificates or who knew someone first. It's about building a life together, making promises and keeping them, choosing partnership over selfishness. Sylvia could never understand that, because she saw relationships as territories to be conquered, rather than bonds to be nurtured. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Holt. "Criminal charges filed. Justice Department taking the case seriously. You should be proud." I was proud, not of the fight, but of standing up for what was right, of refusing to be erased or forgotten or pushed aside. Daniel would have been proud too. 3 months later, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Sylvia had pled guilty to probate fraud and document forgery in exchange for a suspended sentence and community service. She would also have to pay restitution for the legal costs. I felt no satisfaction in her punishment, only relief that it was finally over. The house had become truly mine now, not just legally, but emotionally. I had redecorated Daniel's office, turning it into a reading nook where I could feel his presence without being overwhelmed by grief. I kept his photos on the mantle and his military medals in their place of honor. But I also added new pictures, friends visiting, holiday decorations, signs of life moving forward. Sometimes I imagined what Sylvia had thought would happen after she successfully stole my home. Did she picture herself living here with a fake baby, erasing all traces of Daniel's marriage? Did she think she could rewrite history by changing the paperwork? But the truth has a way of surviving lies. Love leaves marks that can't be forged or fabricated, and sometimes the quiet ones are stronger than anyone expects. I poured myself a cup of coffee in Daniel's favorite mug and sat on the front porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden. Mr. Patterson jogged by with his dog. This was my life now, my home, my rules, my future to write, and nobody could take that away from me ever again.